Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be reading a creepypasta. For those of you who don't know, even though I don't play a whole lot of horror games, I'm very much into the horror scene in terms of like stories and fan writing and things of that nature. And I figured Markiplier's read SCP, or Markiplier's read creepypastas before. Jacksepticeye's read creepypastas. Cry, if you're not familiar with him, like lots of people at some point in their career have read creepy stories, and I realize this isn't exactly the season for it since we're rolling fresh into the summer now. But I don't know. I kind of felt like giving it a shot. So today's creepypasta that we'll be reading is called Gateway of the Mind. It was written or submitted rather in 2009 by an anonymous author, so I can't actually give anyone credit for it, but it's one of the more intriguing creepypastas that I've come across, and it's not that very long of a creepypasta at all. So without further ado, dim your lights, grab a snack, and enjoy. In 1983, a team of deeply pious scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all of his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. The scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of the scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying, "The voices were overwhelming." In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientist for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days, until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he couldn't kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head, and despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with a scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us." And his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Alright guys, so that was the end of the story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you thought about it down below, and what you thought about these SCP readings, or what you thought about these creepypasta readings. If you enjoyed them, I may do more in the future. Again, I really enjoy these types of stories, and I hope somebody out there does too. And, you know, just to make note of it, guys, if you're not aware, it is Caliber Appreciation Month, and I promised to say something nice to Caliber in every video or every stream that I make. So, if you missed the last 2 videos, those are in the thumbnail, because I started recording Arizona Sunshine and I wasn't thinking about nice things to say about Caliber. So here's a nice thing to say about Caliber. Caliber is so righteous that if he ever stepped foot into the Vatican, the Pope would willingly give up his chair for him. Alright guys, so that's it for now. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and maybe drop a comment and hit that sub button. If you're going to just make a random comment, say something nice about Caliber. He's a really awesome guy, especially if you don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, my name is Toki, and as always, I still don't know how to end these.
Bye! Yeah. Some hoop dreams, but no jumper like I'm Adam. My pen is too clean, so I had to stick with rapping. My life is hella deep, dog, you couldn't even fathom. My goals are like Twitter, you can see I'm staying at 'em. I'm trying to be the GOAT. Every day I'm chasing ghosts like I'm Danny Phantom. And I can sell a nigga, but I'd rather sell a hit, it's my niche. And business at the beat, so I had to hit the switch. And I am all in, I ain't on the fence. All these rappers peep my game, I ain't talking Twitch.